Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Well, it is a new year, and with that brings a new list of laws that are going to take effect in 2026. Now, just in this past year, Governor Gavin Newsom signed 794 bills into law. And while I would like to think that all 794 are thoughtful, effective, and necessary, unfortunately, in our state, that is just not the case. So today we are going to look at just a handful of some of the laws that you can expect to go into effect today. Some are so ridiculous that they are just laughable. Others should genuinely concern you. But nonetheless, we are going to look at what I believe are some of the worst bills to have been passed in 2025, as well as inspire us to keep being engaged for the year to come. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information or sources cited in compiling today's episode, then you should check out the corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. Well, friends, welcome to 2026. I hope you had a truly wonderful Christmas and that today you are celebrating the new year with loved ones, with friends, and that you are so excited for all that is to come. 2026 is a big year for us. We have the midterm elections coming up, and so we will be looking at candidates for governor. We will be looking at propositions on the ballot, and of course, we will be staying engaged with all of the craziness that seems to happen surrounding our state. But for today, let's do a quick overview of 2025 and some of the most ridiculous laws that have been passed in our state so that you are not surprised that starting as of today, some of these changes are going to go into effect. First up, we have Senate Bill 1053, and this bill makes us say goodbye to plastic bags in grocery stores. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's been controversy around plastic bags in California for years at this point. So what is new and what does this bill change? Well, if you have lived in California for more than a decade, then you will have experienced a shift in the type of bags that you have gotten when you go to a grocery store or really any kind of store. And that's because back in 2014, they tried to make a plastic bag ban, but that bill left room for loopholes. So what you saw stores and other chains move away from the traditional really flimsy plastic bag, and they made them a lot thicker. And the hope was that in making them thicker, that it would make them actually reusable, which would then fit under the bill that was passed to say that they can only have reusable bags rather than plastic bags. Now, I personally liked the thicker plastic bags. I don't reuse them in terms of taking them to the store, but I do use them for other things around the house or when we travel. So I'll be very sad to say goodbye to the thick plastic bags. I have enjoyed that change. And then because they're so thick, they never broke on you. Anyway, that's my love for the plastic bags. But of course, people are concerned about these plastic bags ending up in the ocean and strangling a turtle. And so it's very important that we just ban them across the board. So as of today, when you go into a store, you should not see plastic bags. You can only see paper bags, and those paper bags will still have a 10-cent charge associated with them, which the plastic bags in the past, you have had to pay 10 cents per bag. So that charge still remains. So why is this a ridiculous law? Let me tell you, it is impossible to move away from all forms of packaging. When you go to the store, you're buying things. You're buying produce, you're buying meat, you're buying packaged goods, and all of those goods have to come in some sort of wrapping. You're not going to walk out of the store with raw chicken in one hand and naked cilantro in the other. No, your chicken is going to come wrapped usually in plastic or in butcher paper if you're going to the meat counter, and then your cilantro and other produce is going to come in those little bags that now they say are biodegradable, so maybe that's how they fly, but you have these bags that you're shoving all of your produce into because, again, you don't want like 15 lemons rolling out of your cart. You want to actually bundle them together. So it's impossible to leave the store without packaging. I don't understand why the problem is just the bags, the vessels that you actually put your groceries into. Those are creating minimal waste in comparison to the many other types of packaging that are found across all types of things that you are buying. Because again, when I buy chicken, it comes in plastic. I'm not buying chicken in any sort of other packaging, in a box, in paper, whatnot. It comes in plastic, and that plastic goes in the trash, and that trash goes to the landfills, which apparently somehow end up into the ocean. So really, your biggest problem is not the bags. And then On the other side of things, we also have to ask what kind of impact will this really have on the environment? Because there's actually a life cycle study that found that paper bags have to be reused far more than plastic bags had to be reused just to break even environmentally. They found that paper bags actually have a larger carbon footprint because they require more energy, more water, and more transportation emissions to make. And so really the impact by shifting only to paper bags is marginal at best. Really, it's just for looks. It's to be able to visually see that people are walking around with paper bags rather than plastic bags, which California has dubbed as evil. We hate plastic here. But it's stupid because if the argument is that you need to reuse the paper bags in order to break even environmentally, I can tell you right now, people are not going to reuse their paper bags. They might use them for other things, but you're not going to be able to take that paper bag back to the store. Those things are flimsy. They rip, they break, the bottom falls out. Sometimes they don't even have handles. And so you're just carrying them incredibly awkwardly. And so it's just not going to work. It's really not going to impact the environment in the way that California lawmakers are claiming that it is going to do. And so really you are just adding more costs to businesses, and it might seem like a small cost, but paper bags are more expensive. And for small businesses, that really adds up over time. And you're adding costs to the consumer as well as just the hassle of not being able to have a sturdy bag when you leave the store. So kudos to California for some virtue signaling. Go to a store today and realize no more plastic bags. Next up, how does it sound to increase the cost of rent? Well, I have good news for you if that sounds good, because according to AB 628, we are going to do just that. How? Well, this bill requires that rental units must include a working refrigerator and stove as part of quote unquote habitable conditions. Now, you might be thinking, what places don't come with a working stove or refrigerator? And the truth is that there are many apartments or rentals that don't come with some of these larger appliances. Personally, my husband and I moved into our lovely townhouse back in 2022, and we had to buy our own refrigerator. We also had to buy our own washer and dryer. And that was a large expense at the time. And I remember thinking, man, I wish these came with it. However, our rent is a lot lower than some of the apartments around us that come with these nicer appliances as well as other amenities. So that leads to my point, which is when you put restrictions on landlords, when you put more requirements on the things that they have to provide, they are going to increase the rent because they are not just going to eat the costs of having to buy large appliances like a refrigerator into their profit margins. Instead, they're going to pass that on to their tenants in the form of higher rent. And really, the bigger problem here is this is just the slippery slope of entitlement. We talk about this a lot of what is a basic human right versus what is just nice to have or maybe is a commodity that you should be able to purchase in the marketplace. And this falls under that category. Usually when we think about habitable living conditions, we're thinking about things like working heat in the winter, running water, making sure that your apartment is not overrun with cockroaches, or making sure that it is structurally safe and sound so that you're not worried about your roof collapsing in on you. But now Gavin Newsom and California lawmakers are lumping in things like a refrigerator and a stove into what's considered habitable. And so the question is, where is it going to end? Are we going to soon require that landlords make sure that microwaves are in every unit? Because after all, everybody these days uses a microwave. What about a dishwasher? It's super nice to have. It makes life more convenient. Therefore, everyone has a right to it. Or making sure that everyone has in-unit laundry. These are things that we look at now and see, oh, they're nice to have, but you can live without them, or you can live with maybe smaller or cheaper versions of them. But according to this logic, everyone should just be entitled to have everything that they want as a part of a habitable living condition. And really, this is just addressing symptoms rather than root causes. If you really want to ask why people can't afford basic appliances, that's because of high cost of living in California. It's because the rent is already too high, even when it is a cheaper rent, because it doesn't come with all of these amenities. It's looking at, again, the high housing costs just across the board. So we need to actually address those issues rather than just imposing more and more regulations on landlords that makes it harder for them to rent out their units and also is going to, again, pass on costs to tenants. Now, if you want to go a step further and really talk about a bill that is all 100% virtue signaling that will not be effective, then we must talk about Senate Bill 518. What this bill does is this establishes the Bureau for Descendants of American Slavery as a permanent state agency here in California. And what this agency is going to do, what their sole job and primary focus is going to be, is on creating defined divisions for individuals based on genealogy, property reclamation, and education. And that will provide a framework for then distributing, you guessed it, reparations. The chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, because yes, we have that in our legislature as well, said about this bill, quote, "For generations, Black Americans has faced exclusion, exploitation, and systemic barriers to opportunity. With SB 518, we lay the foundation for a future built on truth, equity, and repair." And so we see that this is just part of the larger narrative that says that Black Americans are owed something because in the past, some of their ancestors may have been slaves in America, that America is systemically racist, that California bears some of that inherent guilt. And so now we must divert taxpayer dollars into the form of reparations of these descendants of African American slaves. And so now in California, we have to have an entire agency that is built around doing that. But I can't believe I have to say this, dividing people by race or by ancestry is wrong. Just because you do it in the name of equity or because you are supposedly trying to right past injustices doesn't mean that it's not discrimination, because it still is. California and lawmakers just across the United States need to stop looking at the past. They need to stop finding wrongs that they supposedly want to bring into the present to make right. We need to look today at what's actually in effect. If you want to make an argument for there being real discrimination in our laws against certain groups of people based on race, then you need to make that argument. You need to pull out what those laws would be. You need to prove how they are shown to actually be discriminatory and how they are actually keeping people of a certain race back from doing something that everyone else can do in society. But there are not facts. There is not real reason being applied here. It is once again that universal guilt that we saw when we talked about the same thing with Native American tribes. It's just this universal guilt that everyone is supposed to inherit, and you can't say anything about it because if you speak out against it, then you will immediately be labeled as racist. Well, that's wrong. The truth that our state needs to instead be pushing forward is that you can make something of yourself in America and in California. You can get ahead. There is no one holding you back or stopping you simply because of your race. If we wanted to actually right wrongs that were done, that would look like abolishing slavery, which our country did, thankfully, painfully. It took way too long, and yet we did it. It would mean removing discrimination from the public square even after slavery was abolished, because we saw that was a very real thing. There were very real challenges for Black Americans, but the challenges that were there for Black Americans in the mid-1900s are not there today. It is not the same if we compared life now and then. And so we need to be honest about the fact that you should be empowered to make something of your life. If you want to go to college, go to college. If you want to get a job, get a job. If you want to get married and have a family, then do that. If you want to buy a house, here's how you can work toward that. It has nothing to do with your race. And so the reality is that we have done the things to right the wrongs in the past. Reparations will not make any wrongs right today. It will just further this sense of entitlement, as well as deepen the divide between Americans and Californians based on race. And so we need to continue to move forward and actually build something rather than continue to look at the past and see what we can tear down. But again, this bill doesn't accomplish any of that. It is just virtue signaling, and our lawmakers know that. Which brings us to another virtue signal bill. This seems to be a massive theme across California laws, and that is Senate Bill 627. What this bill does is it prohibits law enforcement from wearing masks when they are out and about interacting with the public, and this was passed specifically to target ICE agents. I'm sure you have heard there has been so much in the news and the media about law enforcement around immigration enforcement and ICE agents specifically in sanctuary states and cities like California and like Los Los Angeles. And a large narrative that's been going around specifically in the fall was about these agents wearing masks. And people said this was hypocrisy, that ICE agents are wearing masks and they shouldn't be allowed to do that, that they need to identify themselves, that they should be proud of the work that they're doing if they actually think that it is right. And so there should be no secret police. And that's exactly what our legislature has affirmed, because that is exactly what this bill was even called, of the no secret police in California. And so it says that you can't wear a mask. But we need to ask the question, why is law enforcement feeling the need to wear masks when they go out and about? The reason is that because in states like ours, they are fearing for their lives. There have been real threats on their safety. There have been attempts to kill ICE agents, to dox them, to make their information public so that people can target their location, target them, and target their families. And so ICE agents no longer feel supported, and they certainly don't feel safe going out and about doing their job, even if they believe that it's the right thing to do. And so often the only line of flimsy defense that they have is to be able to guard their identity when they are conducting ICE raids. And this is supported by evidence. The Department of Homeland Security cited data showing an over 1,000% increase in violence on ICE agents compared to now under the Trump administration, compared to what it was back under Biden in 2024. So I just want to repeat that. Violence against ICE agents has increased by over 1,000% just in 1 year. That's insane. And these ICE officers are going out trying to do their job, trying to enforce the law, the literal law that is in place from our federal government. And in doing that, they're literally fearing for their lives. And so that is why they're trying to protect their identity. And why is violence increasing? Well, Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin put it very bluntly. She says that this comes after months of Democrat politicians comparing ICE to Nazis and to the Gestapo. And we also see Democrat politicians actually encouraging illegal immigrants to resist arrest from ICE, trying to actually stop ICE agents from doing their jobs, block them in with cars. We see these videos all over the media today, people shouting, screaming at ICE agents, walking in front of their trucks so that they can't drive away. And so it is no surprise as to why this violence has exploded. And we really need this to change from the top down. We need leaders like Gavin Newsom and like other Democratic governors, as well as lawmakers, to speak out to support ICE agents, even if you disagree fundamentally with the work that they're doing, to recognize that they are a federal agency, that they do have the authority of the federal law backing them. And so no one should be inciting violence, and no one should be resisting what they have the authority from the very president to be doing. But at a time when ICE agents are being hunted, being doxxed, being threatened by very bad actors, this is not just random protesters on the side of the street with their signs that say ICE out of LA. These are actual gang members, because in California, ICE has removed many members of Tren de Aragua and other South American gangs that are incredibly dangerous to you and to me. These gangs are literally targeting ICE agents. They are trying to find out where they live and kill them. So at a time when that's happening to ICE agents, Governor Newsom's response is to sign a bill that continues to strip away their ability to protect themselves. It's disgusting. Not to mention that this is just virtue signaling because it's unconstitutional. Based on the supremacy clause, federal agents are not subject to state laws, and states cannot pass laws that regulate federal agencies and federal authorities. And so really this is unenforceable, and it's largely symbolic. So why are we wasting our time on it? And last but not least, in the vein of passing laws that are completely ineffective for the goals that are trying to be achieved, we have to talk about Assembly Bill 1830. And this bill will now require that corn tortillas and masa products in California contain folic acid. It's just, this bill is really laughable. It's actually quite insane. I'm really amused by it. So let's just go through it. You might be thinking, what is happening? Why is folic acid required to be in tortillas? Why do we have a law about this? What is going on? Let me just explain. You may have heard that folic acid is what women are supposed to take as a prenatal vitamin. Usually you take a prenatal and it contains folic acid, usually in the months leading up to pregnancy and in early pregnancy. And that is supposed to help with birth defects. And so folic acid has been shown to actually reduce birth defects when a child is born. Now, according to the California legislature, they found that 28% of Hispanic pregnant women reported taking folic acid. So that's fairly low. And they compared that to 46% of white women who reported taking it as a prenatal. They see the disparity between 28% of Hispanic women and 46% of white women, and they think, okay, so the Hispanic community is going to now be at a higher risk for giving birth to babies that are born with birth defects. So in order to solve that, California has decided to support nutrition education. They want to make sure that women are empowered and informed to make the best health decisions for themselves and their babies. They've chosen not to mandate what people actually have to put in their bodies, but to make sure that women know what the pros and cons are, and then to support women through all stages of pregnancy. I'm just kidding. They did not decide to do any of that. They just decided to shove vitamins into the food that they stereotypically think that Hispanic women will eat more of. So this bill is really, it's really very stereotypical, and it's, I think, quite offensive to say that the Hispanic community, that they think Latina women are not able to be informed about health decisions in order to make those decisions that I mentioned for themselves and their babies. Instead, they are just going to say, well, they probably eat a lot more tortillas than other groups of people, and so we will just put folic acid in the tortillas, and we will make sure that they get it that way. But this is ridiculous because health is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is really the laziest option that they could have taken to try to solve a problem that really isn't a massive problem. I mean, 28 versus 46% of women is not that significant, given that only 46% of white women are taking folic acid. I don't know why we don't see that as a problem, but regardless, they are taking this issue and now they are just saying, so we'll just make sure that every single person on the face of the planet here in California, every person who lives here will make sure that when they eat Mexican food, that they will be intaking folic acid, regardless of if they are pregnant or not, trying to get pregnant or not, or even tolerant to it or not. Because that's the most ridiculous part of this, is that there are people who cannot process folic acid. And this is largely debated in the medical community when it comes to things like a prenatal. A good portion of women actually have a gene mutation that it's hard to identify, but that gene mutation makes it very difficult to process folic acid. And so they actually need it in a different form when taking it as a prenatal. And that is why different types of prenatal vitamins exist. That's why not every woman is taking the same thing for their body, because each person is uniquely designed and each person is going to process things in a different way. And so you need to be empowered to make those decisions with your healthcare provider based on your medical history and based on the type of challenges that are presented to you. So by shoving folic acid into all tortillas for all people, you're actually putting people who can't process it at a greater risk of now having side effects when they eat certain masa products. And they might not even be able to make that connection because they might not know that you have now included this in their tortillas. Which again is just highly ironic in a state like California, because what happened to do my body, my choice? Aren't we supposed to be allowed to make these decisions for ourselves of what goes into our body or stays in our body, California? And lastly, again, on this point, are we really comfortable with letting the state decide what universally has to go into our food? Because I am not comfortable with that. I do not want them mandating anything. I want my food to be as close to natural as possible. I want them to stop putting in additives and preservatives and all of those things, but I also don't want them to include vitamins. I want to be able to choose what vitamins I take in what quantities and how much. I don't want to know that if I have a week where I eat tacos, I'm now making my folic acid is now increasing because it's just in there, versus weeks where I'm not eating anything with masa products or I'm getting none of it. I just want to be able to make those decisions for myself. I think every person should be informed and empowered to make their own health decisions between them and their healthcare provider. This bill is clumsy, it is patronizing to the Latino community, and it's completely emblematic of how California conducts its policy. So, welcome to 2026. These are some of the crazy things that are happening in California. But again, I just want to emphasize that this is just a snapshot. There is so much more that has passed. There are more serious bills that we will need to look at and cover. There are more changes that are coming to your state. And of course, there are so many more things that are going to happen throughout 2026. So, we need to be more resolved than ever to know what is happening, to understand the bills that are being passed, to stand up against lawmakers who are passing completely ridiculous bills like these, as well as actually speaking out for effective policies that are going to make people's lives better in here in California, not make problems worse, and actually things that we want our lawmakers to spend their time and energy on, because with all of these bills, they definitely should not have been spending time and energy on them. So as we walk into this new year, let's hit the ground running, doing just that, and let's do it together. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. If you love this show, please spread the word and share it with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the California Conversation.